The Galactic Council was a monument to power. A sprawling network of advanced species, each more technologically sophisticated and politically cunning than the next. Together, they had forged an empire that spanned thousands of star systems, one that held the galaxy in a grip of iron control. To them, the galaxy was a machine that operated smoothly when the weaker races were suppressed, their resources siphoned for the greater good of the whole. Power was the currency of the universe, and they had it in abundance. Their enforcement of peace was a cruel mockery of the word, carried out by destruction and conquest. War was their tool, subjugation their method. But there was one species that had continually eluded their grasp: humans. At first, humanity was considered inconsequential, a species on the brink of extinction, their technology primitive, their military barely a threat. The Council thought it would be a matter of time before they fell into line like the rest of the lesser races. They had attempted to subjugate humanity before, sending fleets to Earth with the full expectation that it would be another simple victory, just like the countless others they'd claimed. Instead, each time, the humans survived. It wasn't through advanced weapons or cunning tactics, no. It was their adaptability, their refusal to be beaten, that baffled the Council. One of their greatest leaders, Zelrith, a cold, calculating technocrat of the Zeldra species, was the first to take real notice. He had studied human behavior, concluded that their survival instincts were their most dangerous quality, but he dismissed it as an oddity. Humanity was weak, after all. They had no real resources to speak of. They had no vast fleets, no power to counter the military might of the Council. But even so, something about their persistence gnawed at him. The humans kept fighting, kept refusing to die. It didn't make sense. Zelrith had argued for an all-out assault on Earth, convinced that the time for negotiation was over. It wasn't enough to wipe them out in skirmishes, the humans had to be crushed completely. The rest of the Council had dismissed him initially. After all, the humans weren't organized in any meaningful way. Their technology was obsolete compared to the Council's fleets. Even if humans managed to outsmart them once or twice, there was no denying their technological inferiority. But recent reports showed something that had begun to stir concern. A small, yet highly coordinated resistance had emerged, operating with alarming effectiveness. The humans had managed to delay the inevitable once again, using nothing more than guerrilla tactics, desperation, and improvisation. It was as if they had no intention of being defeated, ever. The Council convened for their most important summit yet. The agenda was simple: Earth had to be destroyed. The representatives from the various species, each vastly more advanced than humanity, had gathered to finalize their plans. The room was thick with the hum of tension. The Seraphites, beings of pure energy with complex quantum technology, floated in the air, their glowing forms pulsing with anticipation. The Krith, the insectoid species known for their ruthlessness and unparalleled hive coordination, clicked their mandibles, awaiting the inevitable decision. The Naxxer, towering beings of organic metal, stared down at their smaller counterparts, their voices like gravel grinding. Their imposing, battle-worn exoskeletons gleamed in the dim light of the meeting chamber. A handful of other species sat, observing the proceedings. The Council operated like a well-oiled machine, each race knowing their place, each voice contributing to the eventual conclusion that was always a foregone one. Earth would be assimilated or obliterated. There was no debate on the matter. This was just a formality. And yet, as the representatives discussed how to break Earth's final defenses, the question hung in the air: why? Why, despite all their technology, all their power, were the humans still able to resist? Zelrith spoke first, his voice cool and calculated. The humans are an anomaly. Their survival is nothing but an accident, driven by a collection of random factors. We need to end the charade before they manage to gather enough intelligence or resources to become a real threat. Their continued defiance must be snuffed out. The Krith ambassador, a large, segmented creature with a mouth like a vice, clicked its mandibles in agreement. It's a stain on the Council's efficiency. A species this backward should not still be a thorn in our side. We need to eradicate them, cleanly, before their guerrilla tactics spread to other systems. Yes, agreed Nerthalus, the calm diplomat from the peaceful Salafian race. He was the only one to voice any semblance of concern, though his words were measured. But must we destroy them? What if? Zelrith interrupted, his voice rising. Peace with the humans? Do not be naive, Nerthalus. We have tried peace. We have sent our emissaries, our fleets, and every gesture of diplomacy we could muster. And yet they resist us. Do you understand? They will never submit. The room fell silent. For a moment, all eyes were on the holographic display of Earth's blue globe in the center of the chamber. A small, insignificant planet in the grand scale of the galaxy. But a planet that had managed to remain a symbol of resistance against the overwhelming might of the Galactic Council. The Seraphites hummed in unison, sending ripples through the chamber. Their voices crackled with static as they spoke, their energy forms shifting imperceptibly. There is something strange about them. Perhaps it is not their technology, but their spirit. We cannot deny that they do not break. And for this, we must prepare for the unexpected. Their survival cannot be attributed to mere chance. The council members exchanged uneasy glances. Something in the room had shifted. This wasn't just another conversation about eliminating a troublesome species. This was an anomaly. One they couldn't explain, nor could they simply write off. The Krith ambassador, still uneasy about the growing doubt among the council, spoke again, but this time, his tone was not as confident. Are we truly certain that eliminating them is the answer? We have underestimated them in the past. Zelrith slammed his fist on the table. This is not a matter for indecision. The humans must be crushed. The council had reached an impasse. A decision had to be made, and quickly. And that decision would set the course for the next stage of galactic history. But before they could proceed any further, a new voice entered the room, unexpected, calm, and utterly defiant. It came from the human diplomat, Jack Carson. No one had expected him to speak, let alone intervene. He had sat quietly throughout the proceedings, observing the creatures in the room, none of whom could possibly understand his species' relentless drive. He had been summoned here as a token gesture, a token presence in the larger negotiation. He was expected to be passive, meek, ready to accept the inevitability of humanity's destruction. But the reality was far different. Jack rose slowly, looking around the room with an expression that bordered on amusement. His dark eyes seemed to pierce through the very fabric of the council's arrogance. Without any hesitation, he spoke. Why attack us? The question, simple, direct, and cutting, hung in the air. It was a moment of stillness. A pause so intense that the silence seemed to vibrate with its weight. No one spoke for a moment. And in that moment, the power dynamics in the room shifted. For the first time, the council's superiority felt fragile. The silence in the room stretched on, the weight of Jack Carson's question hanging like a dense fog. Each member of the Galactic Council, beings who had conquered worlds, erased entire civilizations, and manipulated the very fabric of space-time, found themselves momentarily paralyzed. Their natural inclination was to command, to crush the weak, and to dictate the terms of their existence. Yet now, here in this chamber, they were confronted with something they had never anticipated, a question. And not just any question, but one that exposed their fundamental assumptions. Zelrith, the Zeldra technocrat, was the first to break the silence. His calculated composure wavered for just a moment before he regained his usual icy demeanor. You dare question us, human? His voice was low, sharp with irritation, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. We are the Council, the rulers of the galaxy. Your species is nothing but a primitive inconvenience in the grand design. What do you think you will accomplish by asking such an insolent question? Jack didn't flinch. He wasn't here to back down or make excuses. I'm not asking because I want an answer, he said, his voice cool, steady. I'm asking because you need one. You've made up your minds about us, but you've never stopped to consider why. What do you really stand to gain from attacking a species that can offer you nothing of value? No resources, No advanced technology, no vast fleets of warships. We have nothing that could possibly benefit you. The tension in the room deepened. The Council, for all its power and superiority, had never been forced to question its own motives, certainly not by a species they had dismissed as weak and inconsequential. Jack's words were simple, but they were like a stone thrown into the still waters of their arrogance. It rippled outward, disrupting their certainty. The Krith representative, his segmented body buzzing with agitation, was the next to speak. You think we need a reason to destroy you? Your species is a pestilence, a stain on the galaxy. You resist when you should yield. You fight when you should submit. Do you truly believe we need your permission to wipe you out? Jack tilted his head, considering the Krith's words. That's the thing, though. You don't need my permission. You never have. You've always had the power to destroy us. But it's never been about that, has it? It's about fear. It's about a species that refuses to be controlled, that refuses to bow down, and you can't stand it. A few of the council members exchanged uneasy glances, the reality of what Jack had said beginning to sink in. For centuries, they had been accustomed to crushing civilizations that bent to their will. And now, for the first time, they were facing a species that simply refused to conform. Humans had no grand military machine, no sophisticated weaponry, yet they stood, unyielding, in the face of overwhelming odds. Jack had put it into words: the Council was not acting out of necessity, but out of a profound, almost irrational fear of something they couldn't control. Nerthalis, the Salafian diplomat, spoke softly but with conviction. You're right, of course. The humans are not the only species to resist us, but they are the most persistent. For a species with so little to offer, they possess a kind of resilience that we cannot ignore. It is as though their strength lies in their very inability to break. Jack nodded slowly, appreciating Nerthalis' rare admission. Exactly. You all assume that power comes from technology or fleets or weapons. But what if the real power, the true strength, comes from something simpler, something you can't quantify? What if it's our ability to adapt? To endure? What if that's what scares you? The Seraphites hummed in unison, their energy forms swirling with a strange, flickering rhythm. Their collective voice was both ethereal and disconcerting. This is unanticipated. The humans possess no grand designs. They do not seek conquest. They do not understand the concept of empire, yet they persist. Why? Why fight a battle they know they cannot win? Jack let the question hang in the air for a moment, savoring the irony of it. The most advanced beings in the galaxy, each with the ability to destroy worlds, were grappling with the simplest of questions. Why were humans still here, still resisting, despite having no obvious means of victory? I think, Jack said, his voice cutting through the tension, you've overlooked one key thing about humanity. Our greatest strength isn't in our weapons or our technology. It's in our capacity for innovation. For creating something out of nothing. You call us primitive, and yet we've invented more ways to survive than you've ever imagined. And every time you think you've won, we come up with something new. We're not here to conquer you. We're here because we refuse to be wiped out. The room grew colder. The Seraphites had no answer, and the other council members were starting to feel the uncomfortable weight of Jack's words. Zelratha's eyes narrowed, his frustration palpable, but he had no counterargument. The humans were not the technologically advanced species the Council had expected. They were not even the most powerful in a military sense. But they were persistent. And there was something in that persistence that made the Council uneasy. You've underestimated us, Jack continued, his voice gaining strength. But that's your problem, isn't it? You think because you're technologically superior, because you have power, you have everything. But you've never accounted for the one thing you can't control, our spirit. Our refusal to die. A long, heavy pause followed. It was the kind of silence that filled the air like a tangible pressure, as if the very walls of the chamber were holding their breath. The council members exchanged glances, their confidence shaken. They had not anticipated this questioning, this challenge to their fundamental beliefs. In all their eons of existence, they had never once faced a species that dared to challenge their authority in this way. Finally, it was the Naxxer representative who spoke, his voice a low, resonant hum that reverberated through the chamber. "What do you expect us to do with this information, human? You say we fear you. That we cannot control you. But fear is not enough to stop an empire. We will destroy you, regardless of your defiance." Jack's expression remained unchanged. "Maybe. But what if I'm right? What if the very thing you fear is not something you can kill, something you can subdue with your fleets and your weapons? What if it's something deeper, something you can't conquer? Your empire is built on fear and control, but that's a fragile foundation. You've never faced a species that thrives on chaos, that uses uncertainty as a weapon. And that, my friends, is where your power ends." There was a pause, a palpable shift in the air. The Naxxer seemed to consider Jack's words, and the others were left in uncomfortable contemplation. For the first time, the council wasn't certain of its superiority. For the first time, they were questioning their own methods, their own motives. Zelrith finally spoke, his voice tight with frustration. This is not how this meeting was supposed to go. We were meant to decide on a course of action, clear, final. But now you have given us something to think about. And that, more than anything, is what makes you dangerous." Jack's lips curled into a small, almost imperceptible smile. "I haven't given you anything. I've just made you ask the right questions. And that's more dangerous than any weapon." The atmosphere in the chamber had shifted, and the silence that followed Jack Carson's words felt heavier than ever before. The once unshakable confidence of the Galactic Council had begun to erode. Where they had once been certain of their superiority, now they found themselves facing an unsettling uncertainty. The words Jack had spoken had planted a seed of doubt, one that was rapidly growing and threatening to consume them. Zelrith, the Zeldra technocrat, seemed the most disturbed. He was the most pragmatic of the council members, a being whose entire existence revolved around cold, calculated logic. Yet, even his mind, which had solved countless complex problems, struggled to process what had just happened. Humans, a species he had always dismissed as insignificant, had somehow gotten under his skin. It wasn't their technology, their weapons, or their ability to strategize. It was their refusal to be understood, their defiance in the face of overwhelming odds. "What are you trying to say, human?" Zelrith's voice was more clipped than before, though it was clear his frustration was masking something deeper. "That we should negotiate? That we should seek your understanding instead of our conquest?" His eyes narrowed as he scanned the room, as though seeking support from his fellow council members. "That's absurd. We've ruled for eons. We don't negotiate with inferior species." Jack regarded Zelrith with a calm, unflinching stare. "I'm not asking for negotiation," he replied. "I'm asking you to think. You've conquered countless species, enslaved them, destroyed them, yet here you are, unable to explain why you would waste resources attacking a species with so little to offer." He leaned forward slightly, his gaze piercing. "You've always relied on fear, haven't you? Fear of rebellion, fear of the unknown. But fear is a terrible foundation for an empire. It makes you blind to the truth. And the truth is, humanity isn't some easy conquest. You're not fighting for survival, you're fighting because you're afraid of what we represent." The room fell silent again. This time, it wasn't just the individual discomfort of the council members. It was the collective realization that Jack had struck at something deep within their psyche. For centuries, they had waged wars, eradicated species, and expanded their empire not because they needed to, but because they feared something they couldn't control. And now, for the first time, they were questioning whether their greatest fear, humanity, was real or just a projection of their own insecurities. Nerthalis, the Salafian diplomat, spoke next, his tone softer but still firm. "You speak of fear, human. But you've never known the weight of true power. You've never experienced what it means to be a part of a vast, unchallenged empire. To exist above all others, to shape the destiny of entire star systems. He paused, his ethereal form rippling with energy. It's not fear of you we fear. It's the fact that you don't fear us. That's something new. Something troubling. Jack gave a small, knowing smile. There's a difference between fear and respect, Nerthalis. Respect is earned. Fear is enforced. You've never learned the difference because your empire has always relied on the latter. But humanity, we've survived countless attacks, unimaginable hardships, and we're still here. You think that's a sign of weakness? No. It's a sign of strength. And it's that strength, that resilience, that scares you. Not our weapons, not our technology, but our ability to keep going when everything else says we should fall. The Krith representative, who had been strangely silent for much of the conversation, finally spoke up. You speak of resilience as if it is something to be admired, he hissed, his voice dripping with disdain. Resilience doesn't change the fact that you are insignificant. It doesn't change the fact that you cannot fight against us. If you had any sense, you would see that your resistance is futile. Jack's expression remained unchanged, as though he had been expecting the response. And yet, here we are, he said, his voice steady and unwavering. Fighting. Not because we think we can win in the traditional sense, but because we refuse to be conquered. It's that defiance, that spirit, that makes us dangerous. Not the weapons we wield, but the refusal to lie down and be erased. You can destroy us, but you can't break us. And that's why you're scared. The council members exchanged uneasy glances. For the first time, they were no longer sure of themselves. The idea that humans, weak, insignificant, primitive humans, had forced them to question their very motivations was a bitter pill to swallow. They had always believed that the power to destroy a species was enough to ensure their dominance, but Jack had shown them the one thing they had never accounted for, the indomitable will of a species that refused to bow to their might. Perhaps we've been too hasty, Nerthalis admitted, his voice tinged with uncertainty. Perhaps we've underestimated the human spirit. But we cannot simply walk away from this. We have our orders. Our empire demands action. The council has spoken. Jack's smile faded, but his tone remained calm and clear. You don't have to listen to me. You don't have to change your plans. But ask yourself this. How many times has the galaxy watched as you've crushed a species beneath your heel, only to have them rise again, often in a form you didn't expect? What if this time, instead of destroying humanity, you did something different? What if you tried to understand us, to learn from us? What if, instead of fearing us, you embraced what makes us human? The Krith bristled at the suggestion, his multiple limbs twitching with agitation. You ask for the impossible. We cannot understand you. You are weak. You are not worthy of our consideration. Jack's voice was unwavering. You're wrong. It's not about being worthy. It's about the fact that you have never encountered a species like us before. We don't just exist to serve you. We exist to survive, to adapt, to create something new from the ashes. And that, more than anything else, is what you can't control. The room was still, every council member now locked in internal conflict. The debate had shifted. It was no longer about the destruction of humanity, it was about the uncomfortable truth that Jack had brought to light, that their power, their empire, was based on control and fear, but those were no longer guarantees. Jack had not demanded that they surrender. He had not asked for peace. He had simply made them question everything they had believed about their superiority. And in doing so, he had silenced them, not through force, but with a single question, one they were now too afraid to answer. Zelrith, unable to suppress his unease, finally broke the silence. Enough. We will deliberate on this further. The human question is complicated. But make no mistake, this meeting is not over. Jack gave a slight nod, as if he had anticipated this. Take all the time you need, he said, his voice laced with irony. Just remember, when you return, you'll have to answer one question that matters more than any other. Why did you fear us? The silence that followed was not one of resolution. It was a silence filled with uncertainty, doubt, and the dawning realization that humanity had done something no species had ever done before. They had made the council question its very reason for existence. The room remained heavy with tension as the Galactic Council members sat in contemplation, each mind grappling with Jack Carson's words. The echoes of his final question, why fear us, lingered in the minds of every representative, a stark reminder of their own insecurities. The silence was suffocating, with each leader trying to suppress the growing unease within themselves, trying to cling to the belief that they were the unquestioned rulers of the galaxy. But doubt had crept in, and now they found themselves questioning not just the humans, but their entire way of thinking. Zelrith, the Zeldra technocrat, had always been the epitome of control and logic. His race had been the architects of countless technological wonders, each piece of machinery far beyond anything humanity had ever conceived. Yet now, for the first time, he found himself reflecting on the strange species before him. Humans had no grand empire, no fleet of warships, no weapons of mass destruction. And yet, they had been able to endure, to defy their inevitable annihilation, to frustrate the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. The Zeldra had always believed that technology was the ultimate power, the true measure of a species' potential. But now, the question echoed in his mind, was it possible that they were wrong? His fingers drummed nervously on the arm of his seat. He had witnessed the destruction of countless species, each swept away by the might of his people's machines. But humanity had proven to be different. They had withstood every assault, every attempt at eradication, and still remained. And what was their strength? Resilience. A refusal to accept defeat. In his long life, he had never encountered such a thing. Perhaps it was time to reconsider the value of something other than brute force. Nerthalis, the Salafian diplomat, was the next to speak, his voice carrying a soft but undeniable edge of discomfort. You speak of humanity's resilience, human, he began, his eyes narrow. But how do you explain the warlike tendencies that you exhibit? Your species has attacked and resisted us. It would be foolish to ignore that. How can we trust that you will not turn against us if we show weakness? He paused, his ethereal form shimmering slightly as he collected his thoughts. There's more to a species than its ability to endure. There's also its capacity for destruction. We cannot forget the bloodshed humans are capable of. Jack smiled, but it was not the smile of someone who was about to back down. You're right, he said, his voice clear and direct. Humans are capable of great destruction. But we're also capable of great creativity, great compassion, and great ingenuity. We're not one-dimensional. We are unpredictable. And that's what makes us dangerous, and what makes us worth understanding. Nerthalis hesitated, clearly unsettled by Jack's words. He had expected the human to cower, to apologize, to beg for mercy. Instead, Jack stood his ground, not with arrogance, but with a quiet confidence. This was not a trait the Salafian diplomat had expected. For the first time in his long life, he questioned whether the council had been too quick to dismiss humanity as nothing more than a nuisance. Jack's words resonated deeply, and he found himself wondering, what if we've miscalculated? The Krith, who had been silent for much of the meeting, finally spoke again, his voice dripping with disdain. You speak of humanity as though it holds some special secret, some untapped power that we've failed to recognize. But we have seen your kind before. Resistance without power is simply foolishness. You have no resources, no strategic advantage. You will never be able to challenge the might of the Galactic Council. His many eyes glinted in irritation. So tell me, human, why do you think we should listen to you? Jack's eyes never wavered. Because we don't just fight to win, he replied, his tone level and steady. We fight because we refuse to be wiped out. We don't fight for resources, for power, or for control. We fight because it's in our nature. To survive. To adapt. To rebuild. You can wipe out our cities, destroy our weapons, and burn our planets to the ground, but you will never, ever break the human spirit. That is something you can't control, no matter how hard you try. The Krith hissed in frustration, his many limbs twitching in agitation. But that is what we do, he spat. We conquer, we rule, we control. What you speak of is an illusion. Your species cannot survive without the resources, the structure, the support of an empire. You cannot stand alone forever. Maybe, Jack said, his voice calm but filled with undeniable conviction. But maybe that's where you're wrong. Maybe it's that very independence, that ability to stand alone, that makes us stronger than you could ever imagine. You think you're invincible because you've conquered so many. But what happens when you face a species that doesn't bend? What happens when you face a species that will keep rising no matter how many times you knock it down? Jack's question hung in the air, a direct challenge to everything the Council had ever believed about the nature of power. There was a deep, uncomfortable silence as the leaders of the Galactic Council turned inward, each grappling with the implications of Jack's words. Had they, in their lust for domination, misjudged humanity? Had they failed to see that the true power of humans lay not in their weapons, but in their relentless will to survive? The tension was palpable, but it was broken by a voice none of them had expected. Zelrith, the everlogical technocrat, finally spoke, his voice low but firm. Perhaps we have underestimated you, human. Perhaps it is not your weapons that make you dangerous, but your resilience. Your ability to endure. Your ability to never truly give up. He paused, as if weighing his words carefully. Perhaps we should reconsider our approach. Perhaps, the answer is not to destroy you, but to understand you. Nerthalis nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. It is true. We have overlooked something crucial. Maybe humanity is not our enemy after all. Maybe it is our misunderstanding of your species that has brought us here. Jack's eyes narrowed slightly, sensing that the Council's shift in tone was not purely out of goodwill. I'm not asking for your mercy, he said, his voice unwavering. I'm asking you to understand that there's more to humanity than you've realized. We're not weak. We're not your prey. And we're not your enemies, unless you make us that way. For a moment, the room was still. No one moved. No one spoke. The air felt thick with the weight of the decision that hung over them. The leaders of the Galactic Council were left to wrestle with their own thoughts, to reconsider their stance on humanity, and to wonder if, after centuries of conquest, they had finally met a species whose true strength lay in its defiance. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Zelrith spoke again. We will deliberate on this matter. But one thing is certain, he said, his voice carrying a hint of respect. You have given us much to think about, human. Perhaps it is not our weapons that are our greatest strength, but our ability to adapt. We shall see where this goes. Jack nodded, his expression unreadable. You do that. Just remember, whatever you decide, humanity will still be here. We won't go away. As the Council members began to rise, Jack Carson stood tall, the weight of the conversation settling around him. He had not won the battle yet. But he had planted a seed. And in the end, it was that seed of doubt, of uncertainty, that might just be the greatest victory humanity could ever achieve. The Council left the chamber, their minds no longer as certain as they had been when they entered. And humanity, for the first time, had made them question everything they thought they knew about power, control, and survival.